The Gallup, it always surprises me with this recording nonsense. Okay. So for those that need all this reassurance around Poppy, guys, we are recording this. So please make sure that you say nothing terribly weird or exotic. We are going to cover, and this is part of really showcasing the report and a little bit about what you guys have in mind and a little bit about what the current thinking is. So just to retread and reset, the Gallup Global Workplace Report is a series of reports that come out every 2 years. And it's an in-depth global view about how Gallup sees, from the research, the workplace is shifting. Now, I think the 2023 report comes at a time when we as coaches and those playing in the culture space, the team space, the leadership space, whatever space you're playing around people development, are starting to see what I think are the real impact of COVID. Right. So we segued through COVID. I think we all held our breath. We wore masks. We managed to get through that. Our organizations decided to experiment on hybrid. But I think the things are coming home to roost now, and we're starting to see it in the data. And Gallup has really, I think, done a tremendous job in not only updating us, but giving us some really key insights. And I think we want to do three things today. One is to take you through the insights, globally, what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa, remembering that this report is available. And if you don't have it, we'll share it, or you can go to our company LinkedIn page for it and so on. But it has really longitudinal data. And by longitudinal data, I mean year on year. Right, so we can start to see what's changing and what is not changing. And we'll also then have a focus where we live, which is for us the importance of sub-Saharan Africa. Gallup separates Africa into North Africa and sub-Saharan, so everything south of, say, Egypt, Morocco, and Algeria. And they will do country by country. We'll look at some of the aggregate stuff, and then we'll talk about implications and some of the recommendations from our side. And I think, forthcoming attractions, what Gallup is starting to see is not only the key idea around the importance of engagement, but slightly a shift in what is important in engagement. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll make some recommendations, both from a Gallup perspective, but also from what Mrita and myself are seeing in the workplace. So we're very happy to share what we've been experiencing over the last 6 to 8 months. We've just been very fortunate to work with a lot of executive teams, a lot of management groups, a lot of teams, a lot of businesses in the hybrid phase, restructuring, change, any one of those things. You're welcome to pick our brain. And we're happy to share some thoughts about how we see this is moving based in the context of the data that we are going to share. So I'm hoping to present for about 40 minutes, and then, we can do some arm wrestling about questions and answers. Makrit's job is the tough one, which is she has to police, man, or whichever terminology, capacitate the chat function. So you are very welcome to put your questions in the chat where she can answer. She will, if not, she'll interrupt, and we can sort of have a conversation, little piece as this thing rolls out. Otherwise, what it feels like is a 40-minute personal dialogue with myself. And whilst I enjoy that, it's perhaps not what I want on a Tuesday afternoon. So guys, you're free to interrupt, put your hand up. I always love it when somebody goes, no, I disagree. Any one of those things, remembering that Gallup has great research, but we're not a cult. In other words, you don't have to agree with us. So some a bit critical analysis, please share what you're experiencing, and let's make this a rich conversation. If we're all happy with that, I'm going to jump straight in and share with you the dreaded slide pack, and we can take it from there. So what we've really titled this is Rethinking Workplaces for a Thriving Africa. And the reason why we've picked this is because it's our great passion. And our work that we do at BHG is we really want to rethink the way that we work with people. And the reason for that is always in the Gallup world, as a Gallup coach, for example, we always want to leave a lasting positive legacy. So it's really about how do we rethink the way that we want to work with people so that we can thrive. And there's nothing wrong with that aspiration around the idea that we across this continent can get just so much better around the people space. We don't think of it as a deficit. We think of it as an opportunity to take where we are now and just make it so much better. And I think that's the aspiration that we have as BHG. If you're here for financial managers, you'll be entertained by this, but probably not for you. So let's hope everybody's in the right space. For those that aren't aware and just maybe or need a reminder, BHG, the Being Human Group, is the company that we run. We're able to bring you the stuff because we are, I like to say, an award-winning Gallup strategic licensee. Fun fact, we were the first strategic partnership outside of the US that Gallup ever appointed. The good news is we were first. I think sometimes the more challenging is that I think they experiment with us. So we often get some strange stuff. We get all the new stuff and the weird and the wonderful. But I think we've been really a nice clearinghouse and an engagement opportunity for Gallup across the Africa piece. Our mantra and what we do is we want to empower people through the knowledge and application of strengths. We just think it's a wonderful tool and approach to do that. It's far better to work in a strength space in our mind than to worry about what you don't have. And we're always constantly amazed, positively amazed by what people bring to the party from a strength point of view around their power and edge. And that's the lens that we want to hold today. We want to positively disrupt workplaces because we think the world has changed, guys, whether we like it or not. Traditional views of leadership and management, I just don't think work well enough. And you'll start to see in the data the shift from we think we're in charge to our employees who know they're in charge, right? So just think a little bit about that psychology, and we'll talk a lot about that from a data perspective. And we want to change the way people lead by using the science of strengths. And one of the things that we've always appreciated about Gallup is just the depth of research and data available for us so that we can make informed decisions, that we can start to look about the future, not about the past, and about really getting to know our workplaces and the people that we employ. So that's a little bit about us. We managed along the way to win a couple of awards, which we're very proud of, and so on. And of course, we're part of the International Coaching Federation community as well. So what we're going to do today is really three things. We're going to look at the global data as context because, you know, as much as we like to think that we are different in Africa, the global world is an integrated world. We're going to then segue into what about Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa piece, and then we're going to talk a little bit about implications and recommendations. For us, we love the data, but data is like strengths. Knowing your strengths is great. Using your strengths is even better. So we want to be in some intentional space and to start to think a little bit about what we could use data for, and hence we'll talk a little bit about the recommendations. Okay, nobody's shouting at me, so let's move on. The data. So we'll look at the global first. This comes from the State of the Global Workplace 2023 report, and it's called something I think quite intriguing, the voice of the world's employees. So when Gallup does this research, and they do millions of employee interviews every single year, and remembering this comes out every 2 years, it's about what employees think are important, not about what CEOs think are important, which I think is a really interesting differentiation. And the litmus test here is what's your talent thinking? And what do they need from us to take that forward? Again, the full report, which is a very large one, is available. If you haven't seen it yet, just do a shout out. It's also on our company LinkedIn page if you haven't visited recently. So first aggregate data point. The percentage of employees thriving at work has reached a record high in 2022. Now that might on first view seem amazing. Well, how is it possible post-COVID that employee engagement has reached a record high? It has reached a record high, but a record high of only 23%. Okay, so we've got to 23% of the global workforce, we estimate, are engaged. In other words, when we talk about engagement, we're talking about those that are driving the agenda, that have high energy, that bring discretionary effort to the workplace. In other words, as employees, they, in our terminology, are thriving. Only 23%. So if we think about that, 4/5 of the world's employees are not engaged. And you can just so imagine what the impact on productivity is. Gallup estimates anything from $3 to $5 trillion a year is the impact of not getting this right. So yes, a bit of an uptick, but nothing really, I think, to shout out for. So you can see 2019, 22%, 2020, 20, 2021, 21%, and now we've capped it really at 23%. Now we can speculate that things are slightly getting better, and perhaps they are, and maybe in 2025 we'll see another 2%. But guys, 80% of our workforce is still sitting in a space that we don't want them to be. So that's sort of the finding. I don't think that there's any huge surprise there. I'd be interested in your view in the chat if you wanted to express one, but that was the first piece of context. The second piece of context is really about the majority of the employees in the survey are really in that space called quiet quitting. So Gallup has slightly renamed their 3 stages of engagement. So if I could just use my annotate here. So 23% are thriving. They're engaged. That's where they want to be. 59% is not engaged, or the quiet quitting. I'm going to come back to quiet quitting because hold that thought, 59% in that space. And then 18% are the loudly quitting. I love that terminology, loud quitting, actively disengaged. These are the people that drink your coffee, steal your toilet paper, and maybe let down your car tires in the car park, right? So that's really sort of what's come in. And I think Gallup's connection with not thriving and quiet quitting from a research point of view is really very interesting. So it's not just that they're taking up space. You know, we always used to say they take up space in your building, but they are actively looking to move. And I think that's the shift in the engagement survey data, which I think is quite interesting. Okay, so just the definition on the right-hand side. Quiet quitting, putting in the time or the minimum effort required, often that 8-to-5 mentality, psychologically disconnected from the employer. You know, people's side hustles become more important, more likely to be stressed and burnt out. We see a tremendous amount of that because they feel lost and disconnected. And I was interested in what some of the people were saying is, you know, hybrid has not made this connection thing any easier. And you can start to see organizations asking great questions about how do we, what does our organizational culture need to look like given that we work very differently? How do we connect with people that we don't see often? You know, these are really meaningful and great questions. And what I'm pleased to say is you're not the outlier. The data gives you a great indication that the questions you're asking is really spot on. So hold that thought around the quiet quitting or the not engaged component. The other one that they start to look at from a longitudinal point of view is stress. So although the world has recovered from the worst of the pandemic, employee stress remains at a record high level. So now you start to see an interesting set of relationships happening here. On the one hand, we've slightly stabilized and improved engagement. On the other hand, in that engagement data hides the figure around quiet quitting. And then the correlation here is 44% of people are experiencing feelings of stress, daily stress, not just occasional stress. The question here is, did you experience the following feelings during a lot of the day yesterday? Now, that's not just 5 minutes. I'm annoyed because the coffee machine doesn't work as well as I'd hoped. This is a lot. And yesterday, so it's fresh in mind. And 1 in 2 people are sitting in that space. And I think if you're doing a lot of one-to-one coaching, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa at the moment, I think what you're seeing is that people are really vulnerable at the moment. On the one hand, we have jobs that are very high pressured, high stress, high demand, people needing to do 120%. On the other hand, COVID has really made a lot of families financially vulnerable. So people are really in that space of fear. And it may not be fear because they've been bullied or harassed or that, but fear that that you know they can't take a breather from the business, or they can't sometimes see perspective or that type of thing because there's a whole lot of things happening. Family, work, all of this type of stuff is coming through. And if you live in South Africa for the last 6 to 7 months, I don't need to tell you, additional anxiety. Will the lights be on? Will they not be on? Will the robots work? Where are the potholes, you know, and safety and so on. So that well-being element man, if I can flag one thing there around the stress, is we see well-being as an incredibly important issue, and it will remain so. Now, I'm not talking about well-being where an organization with the best intentions, puts a gym in place and, talks about healthy eating. I'm talking about systemic well-being where we look at somebody holistically, career, financial, community, social, all of these factors, and maybe even spiritual. So I think organizations are really being pushed to go beyond the workplace boundary when they start to think about daily stress and employee well-being. The fourth one, which I think is interesting, globally, over half of employees express some level of intent to leave their job. In other words, 51%. Currently employed workers said they are watching for or actively seeking a new job. So they are distracted. 1 and 2. When people are engaged, the number of people that are looking for jobs drops down to 43%. When they're not engaged, it goes up to 61%. So that quiet quitting little circle that I showed is really mission critical, because if they're in the space, over 61% of them are actively or watching to move. Hold their thought, because it comes up in the Africa data in a way that I think I was quite shocked. I hadn't anticipated. So forthcoming attractions around that. And here's the one that I think you're going to be very fascinated in. So Gallup really looked at how people experience stress across fully remote, hybrid, and on-site. So if you look at the little diagram there, so they looked at fully remote, hybrid, and on-site. And they compared how many engaged, not engaged, actively disengaged. And you can see that there is an interesting almost equivalency. On-site people seem to be overall less engaged than hybrid. But hybrid is was only marginally better than fully remote. So that's intriguing. But here's the real issue. Engagement is 3.8 times as much influence on employees' stress as work location. So in other words, it actually doesn't matter as much as we thought about where people work from if your employee engagement is high. So you're starting to see that key issue around stress and well-being coming through, and you're starting to see that workplace where you're placed matters, but not as much as the engagement stuff matters. And I was intrigued to say that on-site is more stressful than other combinations. And that was intriguing for me because, post-COVID, we were all living and working in the offices. So again, sort of some interesting thoughts around that. Then when Gallup asks people, so, all right, you're not happy, we get that, or you're not engaged. What would you like to see that makes the workplace better? And there were some interesting things that came up. And really what they were saying is, well, 16% well-being, about 1 in 5. 28% said pay and benefits, so no surprise there. That's if you ask people, are they overpaid? They will always tell you, no, they're not. And hence I started the conversation this afternoon that I feel overworked and underpaid, but I'm engaged in the sense I'm work motivated. So just to reassure Mahrit that we're all in the same place for the right reasons. And here is the kicker. They wanted more engagement or a better workplace culture. So that connection piece that people are saying is missing becomes then a key clue around what is important, I think, going forward for workplaces, which is how do we look at the engagement and culture, and it's around connection. Connection. And then I think it's a little bit to make sure that you're paying people right. There's nothing wrong with that. And then, of course, the well-being space. So some intriguing thoughts there. But I was, again, surprised by that staff members are asking, or employees are asking for culture. So it's intriguing. Now, if you're working in the culture space, you're going to say, I told you so, and you would be right. Let's segue to some of the data in across sub-Saharan Africa. So when we look at engagement, you'll see that Global 23 We're sitting at Sub-Saharan Africa 20. We're 3 off the global thing, so we're tracking very closely to that. And you can see really no change over the last 2 years. So we haven't stabilized, we haven't improved, we're not, we've just been, I think, a little stuck in that. If you then look at daily stress, global 44%, Africa 46%. But here's the intriguing thing. We've gone up by 9 points. Okay. So seems to be a general improvement across the piece there. If we look at daily anger, I'm sure they did not take my feedback last night when the lights went out, but daily anger, global 21%, Sub-Saharan Africa 26, up by 3 points. So we're tracking not a major difference across the world, given the fact that, we're seeing riots all over the place, and of course we have the Ukraine war. But here's the key thing. The key takeout for me is intent to leave. 51% globally, 70% Sub-Saharan Africa. What a massive difference. And this is in a context where we all generally accept that there are high unemployment rates across the piece. So you would think that job security would be an issue. And yet what we're seeing is those people that are talented, good, energetic, have options. 70% of your talent is sitting in that I am hoping to leave space. Some of it's you, around culture perhaps, and engagement and leadership and management. Others would be environmental stuff, In South Africa, I think everybody's looking to see whether they should pack for Perth or not, or versions of that. But I thought that discrepancy there stood out for me. And I would be interested in some of your thoughts about what could be happening there. Margriet, anything in the chat that people want to share?
Yeah, so Yendor comments that this is very important information, and they just want to know, where, how to score these aspects, and they want to compare their environment with the global trends. Yeah. So yeah, very important.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So you mentioned people want to know how to score this. Did I hear correctly?
Yes. So I just mentioned the Q12, and we were able to assist with the Q12. So yeah.
Right. Okay. We'll talk generally about employee engagement measures. If guys want to do a comparison, we're happy to help out with that. That's a great question. Let's get to that a bit later. Okay. So takeaways for leaders, right? So if you're presenting to your CEO, what should be keeping them awake? Most employees are neither engaged nor actively disengaged, right? They're sitting in that quiet quitting zone. Problematic. And I so hear CEOs and leaders, as they say, listen, my team is stuck. If you feel that your team is stuck, this is what's happening. Neither engaged nor disengaged. I can't get them out this rut. They seem to be, they're coming to work. They seem to be working hard, but we're just missing that X factor. Employee engagement does not mean happiness. So engagement for us is not a factor of whether you smile at work or whether you had a good lunch or anything of that. Happiness is something different in the Gallup world. John Clifton's just produced a great new book on happiness for those that want to explore that a bit deeper. But for us, engagement is about what really matters around motivation. So you can be highly motivated but upset with your boss. That's okay. So it's not a happiness factor or a staff satisfaction survey. So this is a scientific understanding of what matters for employees. So for those that are running staff satisfaction or pulse surveys, guys, nothing wrong with that. Please continue. We would never throw stones at it. But for us, engagement is something that is material. What really matters to staff? Quiet quitting employees are your lowest hanging fruit for productivity gains. I want to pause there because I do a lot, as you can imagine, with Margriet, a lot of presentations to CEOs, C-suite executives, and they want to know the answer to this. So what the good news is, they are starting to ask the right questions, but they don't know where they need to start. And these quiet quitting guys are the ones where, without CapEx or restructuring or bootstrapping or any of those other great OD things that we often aspire to, they are low-hanging fruit. In other words, to switch them on is not difficult. in the sense that it's a simple answer. It may be difficult to do in the sense of rolling it out, but it's clear in the research what you need to focus on. And we'll talk a little bit about that under recommendations. But that 50-odd% is really where you need to spend your time on. And of course, remember, 70% of that in Africa, at least, are looking to move elsewhere. So the key. And here is really, I think, the X factor, or where you need to start, is the manager is the linchpin for engagement. Now, for us, managers are those mid-tier people that, you know, executives like to boss around and tell what to do and where the strategy is. So they've got to enact strategy, and they've got to align and lead teams. So they're the jam in the sandwich, and probably have one of the most difficult jobs, I think, in organizations. You know, they're not executives yet they're at the shop floor and the nuts and bolts with people, and that's where also your customer experience sits, right? So the quality of your manager and in the space of engagement is the lever that's going to change the world. And Gallup's written extensively about it. The book they produced was called It's the Manager. Over 1 million interviews with managers about what matters and what they do and so on. They interviewed over 1 million managers, and their estimation is of all the managers they interviewed, only about 1 in 10 are naturally gifted at being good managers in the space of the changing workforce. They may have been great managers post-COVID, no argument there, but are they equipped to deal with the changing workforce, the will of the changing workforce post-COVID? No, not so sure. And Margriet will tell you tons of stories. We're just seeing such a lot of that, and it's making managers anxious. And a lot of the management teams we're working with are nearing burnout, trying to manage all the moving deck chairs because they're trying to be all things to all people, rather than, I think, focusing on what's really important. Is let's work with those quiet quitters. Let's help to switch the lights on. And we'll talk about that. So what are the implications, guys? It's all very well to have global data and sub-Saharan data. So what? Well, there's quite a lot in the so what space. Here is what Gallup has taken out of all this data. It's called the new will of the worker. And genuinely, there is a shift from thinking we as leaders are in charge to really the idea that the workers, your employees, their will, what they think is important is what's going to swing this or not. And it's going to be dependent on how you manage them. And there are 3 things that have come through here fundamentally. Keep in mind the engagement stuff, right? No more commuting. Guys, we cannot be unequivocal enough about this issue. Those CEOs around town, and you know who they are, that want people back in the office because they don't trust them or want to see them or whatever the story, that's not going to work. Secondly is family has become really important. It was important, but it's become front of mind. People want flexibility for their family. And then there's just really the important thing is they want higher well-being. That links into the engagement because if I don't have to commute, I've got flexibility with my family, I can set myself up for success, and I'm starting to get that work-life balance right. My engagement score comes through quite strongly. Now that's sort of what organizationally, how organizations need to think. And we'll talk a little bit about what the implications for managers are. And here's a slide that I love. What really has happened is Gallup has actually shifted with the data some of the implications and shifted and grown or expanded their understanding of engagement. So sitting behind all Gallup data is what they call the Q12, the 12 questions or the 12 things that matter for employee engagement, and they've added 4 more. So their thinking around engagement's changed, and it's because of the employee needs that come out of the data. Employee needs, challenge me, help me review my contributions, help me build mutual trust. Now, I'm going to pause there. A lot of the work that Margriet and myself do with teams is build trust. Without trust, there is no collaboration and partnership and all that good stuff. Help me feel proud. Help me see my importance. Working with a gentleman, 60 years old today, and Nobody's just valued or recognized his importance, and yet he sits with 2 skills in South Africa that are scarce: technical and trading. So from a skills point of view, he's actually a unicorn. Love him to bits, but nobody's told him his value. Hear me, not survey me, hear me. Care about me. Help me see my value. Know me. I'm going to just highlight one of the things about data is not about doing things to people. It's about knowing them. How do we know them? And that's why I love strengths, because it shows us a way, a non-judgmental way to understand how people can show up, what to do in that space around development, how to recognize their contribution, and how to get them to contribute more in a way that's authentic to them, right? Free me from unnecessary stress. Guys, a mantra: rework, bureaucracy, bottleneck decision-making. That's just on the inside. Your clients are telling you the same thing. If you're a customer of a large corporation, you don't want to go to a call center with a push button dial of 17 options, right? Free me from unnecessary stress. Focus on me. And they've really brought that in and summarized all those into 4 additional things to think about in engagement. Number 1, treat me with respect. I cannot fundamentally tell you how important that is. Again, today, I was just doing some coaching, and we disrespect people, often inadvertently. We want powerful voices to emerge. This is what women have been telling us in the workplace for years, is we don't listen to them, as an example. And that came up this morning. Care about my overall well-being. So don't laugh at me or pay lip service to the fact that I want work-life balance now. Non-negotiable. That flexibility, really mission critical. Why police somebody that's going to go watch a child play in the afternoon a sport when you know that person is going to work to 11 o'clock at night to do what they need to do? Why police? And deliver what we promise. It goes back to that trust. Organizations now need to deliver on what they promise. So rather under-promise and over-deliver in the space around people than try and kumbaya, hand-holding, life is good, what, everything's awesome. It's not. What can you do? But if you promise, it goes to the heart of that trust and respect piece, deliver. And so you're starting to see a different set of measurements coming through from engagement. So I think there's a great shift now that I think a lot of the engagement survey approaches that you have in the market really need to adjust and start to adopt and to bring on board. Respect, very different type of thinking around measurement, overall well-being, meaningful feedback. Oh my word, have we had a struggle with this? Managers say to me, oh, I have no time. And I said, well, when last did you speak to Joe? Oh, yesterday. How long did you speak to them? Oh, 5 minutes. What did you speak about? Well, I was just shouting at him because he hadn't done something. Now, that 5 to 7 minute can be rechanged into something meaningful if, as a manager, you know how to do that, right? So there's really a shift in management skills as well. So my challenge to you guys before we open up for general comments and so on is, how will you positively disrupt engagement in your organization or team? To summarize, the new will of the worker: no more commuting, flexibility for their family, higher well-being. For us, about how do we disrupt this is to take perhaps traditional engagement surveys and measures and look at what measures now, or what matters. Let me retread that. Measure what matters now, okay? And what I mean by that, I'm getting ahead of myself, so bear with me. What I mean by that, measure what matters now, is measure who are your quiet quitters, right? Who are they? How do we measure that? What is the well-being? How is respect moving? What are those 4 issues that Gallup has seen that the will of the employer has shifted in terms of motivation? We want to use data to look forward, not backwards. Guys, the past is interesting, but it's not going to tell you what is now important and projection to what the future is going to look like. If you don't address quiet quitting, you can take your performance management ratings, you can project them 5 years into the future, and they will stagnate. Now, if you think that performance ratings and your performance is more or less aligned, your performance from your human capital is going to stagnate. More importantly, is your good guys. 71% of them are going to go look for another job. So not only are you going to stagnate performance-wise, but you're going to go backwards from a talent point of view. That's about future orientation. So what is it about the future that's important now that we need to implement? And we're arguing around employee engagement strategies is what you're doing, dust off, check that's still valid, because the future is now. And so we see quite a radical resetting of employee engagement strategies. So the idea that your succession planning process can take 8 months, guys, reality is that's 6 months too long, probably. And so we're into real-time employee decision making, or decisions about employees, real-time decisions about employees. And what are your managers doing to hold the fort and to grow the engagement? What are your leaders doing to make great people decisions? And are we giving them the data at the right time? And we want to increase adoption, not content. So I had this wonderful experience yesterday. I'm working with a group of engineers, and engineers love data. So I thought, okay, well, we're going to really make life difficult for you. So we probably gave them about 40 or 50 different strength behavioral data points that to have a look at for each one of them. And I started to see, and it was quite funny, that even engineers can sometimes run out of enthusiasm for data. Okay. And what I mean by that is we want people to use data, not just increase what they measure. Because there's a great temptation here to start measuring everything. And because some of our organizations have access to AI and real-time measurement, we're starting to measure everything from employee DNA, I exaggerate for effect, but you know where I'm going with this, to clock-in times and everything in between. That's great, but so what? Pick the 4 things that Gallup's recommending. Measure that. And I think you'll be quite interested to see what that data tells you around decision-making for your organization. So I just want to go backwards a little bit because I just want to make sure that you, and there are the 4 things that I want to summarize. So the issue for me is, are we measuring and projecting respect? Do we care about overall well-being? Are we being inspirational around meaningful feedback? This is why the manager is so important. Do we deliver on what we promise? We're saying if you measure those 4 things now and you adopt it, you seriously manage it, you're going to get increases in well-being, performance, and of course, engagement, with a workforce that is shifting from quiet quitting to a little bit more actively engaged, which means in sub-Saharan Africa, you don't have 71% of your workforce at this stage in this survey looking over their shoulder around side hustles, moving to your competitors, or frankly, just doing something else. So guys, have we taken sort of what we think are the highlights of the global state of the workplace? I'd like to think we've shared some of what we think are really important, but let me just emphasize, the report is very deep and detailed. We really recommend that you go through it with a little bit of a fine tooth comb. But as always, if you need some help in that space, you want us to provide a little bit more information around engagement, particularly the Q12 and how that's working, management or leadership development, or a little bit around well-being and how this all comes together from a culture perspective, we of course are always here to answer your questions. On that happy note, guys, we've got 15 power minutes left before we are calling the session, so we're open to general questions and answers. But before we open it up to the floor, Margriet, anything further in the chat that has been interesting?
Yendor, so Tanya mentioned that we should try to get management to accept these findings. There's a
yeah,
and,
no, I appreciate that.
And she's interested in the how, right? How do we
Yeah,
get
yeah.
there?
Right.
People
Okay, so
people
let's
feel
start.
that it's not our company. It doesn't represent our company. Of course, it represents the whole world except my company. So, what would you say to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm laughing because you're so right. Okay, so it's not just you, and I always say it's not an outlier question. I think everybody's asking us. We're seeing a couple of things move though, and this is my reassurance. One is, managers are telling me themselves, they go, I'm working very hard, I'm feeling stressed and burned out. And you ask why, and they say, no, I'm great, but my team's not great. They've just invited you to have a discussion about engagement. So the way that we are engaging managers is not throwing data at them, is asking them what are their burning needs. And they will tell you. And there are two halos, there are two hyperboles in the management world. One is, I'm brilliant, my team is useless. Problem there. Okay. Or alternatively, my team is great, but they're not performing. That's a starting point for a conversation around, right, so tell me a little bit what's happening. And here is the common sense view. They will say to me, feeling like management feels like pushing a rock up a hill. And then I say, funny you should say that. What happens if it doesn't have to be that way? And they go, tell me more. The second thing is, I always say to them, how do we switch the light bulb on here without having to restructure, redo this and all that sort of stuff? Would you be interested in let me show you some of the data around that? Absolutely. If I say to you, well, I can play to what you're good at, and if we look at your management strengths, can we build a really great team plan? Okay, I can do that. So what I'm illustrating is that the how here is not death by data. When I work with investment bankers or engineers and data is important, then man, we do heavy lifting data. But this comes out of the conversational piece. So anecdotally, they'll tell you, I'm stressed, I'm burnt out. Please, can you fire my entire team because they're bloody useless or versions of that. And then you say, you're not alone. And here's the key shift, you're not alone. How can we help? So I tend to not want to push managers or do to managers. I want to create a bit of a pull environment. Let's pull them into our world rather than the other way around. Now, is that a perfect set of analogies? And would you, with your 50 managers tomorrow, succeed with all of them? No. You just need to start with one. And you help one. And what happens is that the rest of the teams get really upset with you because one team is getting all the good stuff. They're a little bit happier. They're more engaged and energized. And so it starts spreading. And that's why we love the positive intent around strengths. I'm going to just segue there because I think Reba's put her hand up. Reba, go for it.
Yeah, I think Yanda. I'm just trying to process this on my side because most of the time you deal with, I mean, in our environment, there's a whole lot of unions and all stuff. And you have to engage with the unions sometimes before you even engage with managers on certain things.
Yep.
And it makes managers a bit despondent in a way. So I just want to hear your view in terms of how can I deal with that? I'm trying to implement a certain process that impacts on employees. Which if I go and talk to managers before I talk to employees or unions, some managers may leak information and it might make it difficult. But if I go through the employees and the union representatives, it might be a good thing, but then managers start saying, we had this. Why didn't we hear this from you? Why do we have to hear this from employees? How do we deal with that kind of situation? I just want to hear your view on that.
Yeah, Reba, I think that's a great question. I don't pretend to be an expert on unions, but some of my experiences in the space I'm happy to share with you. So all unions are concerned with employee well-being. And I think that if you want the hook for managers, it's about how do I manage more effectively in an easier way with more outcomes. For labor, it's about, right, guys, we're worried about our employee well-being. We'd like your support in this area. And I think, Reba, that changes or shifts the conversation because I think you're having the same conversation in a different way with different stakeholders. It's what Margriet would often call the stakeholder triangle. How we show up for our union colleagues vis-a-vis for our managers is different, where we're starting to engage, connect, and starting to drive the agenda. Reba, I'm not pretending that that's easy, but it's about, where the needs of each constituent sits. And the well-being one is one that I've experienced where the union has been very vocal and supportive. So maybe something for you to consider, but I do appreciate it that we've given you tons of data. So give some thought to that, and work through that. Okay. Margriet, other questions?
Thank you, Felgate.
Yeah, Reba, you're welcome. Margriet, other questions there that we can stimulate the conversation?
I think, so what would your answer be to Elon Musk, who absolutely disagrees with people staying at home? And after that, let's segue to Tommy.
Yeah. Look, I can say with a straight face, in a very serious way, according to Gallup, he's wrong.
Love it.
So, look, there is always the outlier, and we love Elon because he's a disruptor. Is he right? My serious question is, I'm not sure. The Gallup research would indicate that maybe not so much. But has he highlighted a particular weakness of a particular culture in Silicon Valley, in that area where, the fact is that, if you believe some of the stories around Twitter, they had too many managers as opposed to the right managers? Well, maybe he's got a point, but the jury is out. But I think the research for me is indicative, and I would feel a little uncomfortable when, he fires everybody and starts again. I think that that's interesting. Garth saying, he said companies are lazy to engage with employees. Perhaps there's a truth there. Okay, so officially, Gallup's right, Elon wrong. Let's see. Tommy.
Yeah, so just to unmute myself. Thank you so much, Yendor. So I've always been intrigued by the challenge that we face with management and leadership in organizations. So when I scout through tons and tons of exit interviews or talking to guys who have left the organizations, and they give you like the top 8 reasons why they exit.
Yeah.
It's always there in the middle about leadership and management.
Yeah.
Is it that we promote people too early into management? Is it that we don't prepare them for managing people? I mean, because again, these guys were fantastic as subject matter experts, as professionals, as standalone guys. Then they fail fantastically as people managers, and people leave because of that. Where exactly is the issue?
Yeah, Tommy, great question. So research, the Gallup would say the following is, we do very little to prepare managers to manage properly in this new work environment. The second one is, I think, and this is what you won't say easy, it's implied in the literature, but this is my view around it would be, is that leaders mess managers around because leaders are not aligned. And here's the key thing: leaders need to be aligned, managers need to be able to manage in a way that makes sense. And we're really struggling in a lot of our work with executive teams that are not aligned with each other. They may or may not agree on the strategy. They don't catalyze in the right way. They don't connect the business in the right way. And then managers are all at sea, even if they're managing properly. The key thing about this is also what you don't see in the literature, but traditionally I think has been a great point, is what do you think management work is about? Because we promote people that are underprepared, and then we promote them because they're the best firefighters in the business, not the best people managers. And because management is about solving problems, often in organizations, rather than managing people. Now, until we shift to really managing people, as opposed to firefighting, managers are not going to, even if they're hugely capable in that space, are not going to spend enough time managing people, right? So do organizations really value management, or do they just value firefighting and solution people? We run from one fire to the next and putting it out and band-aiding and patching and so on. Many organizations think that's good management, and I think that is not the case. So Tommy, a whole lot of interrelated stuff there, but I mean, that book, It's the Manager, I think is a great book, but I can just validate that from my experience as well. Yeah. Okay, good question. Right, Margriet, you're on a roll. Any other questions there? I forgot to mention, guys, that the hard questions go to Margriet and the easy ones to me, and so far you're not cooperating, right?
So it's really Tanya who's on the roll here. She actually asked the question around technical skills being promoted and not leadership skills, and she asked the question, which I think is a key one. How do we change that? She says that at their organization they've tried several development plans, but it doesn't stick over the long time, over the long run. So what's your thoughts here, Yendor?
Yeah, I mean, I want to link back to a little bit about what I was chatting to Tommy about. I mean, I think the secret lies in there. And here's the key shift. So you can send people, and bless, again, I was working with engineers, all who have MBAs, which are, how do you know somebody has an MBA? Because they tell you, right? They're great oaks. But they have all this stuff in their head. And I'm going, for me, the shift is unequivocal. We want to move managers from being the boss to being a coach. So first of all, I think you've got to shift the right set of skills, right? So there's a capability issue. The second one is you've got to value the job of a manager, which is, in my mind, 80% of their time on people, as opposed to 80% of time on emails and meetings. I'm going to pause there because I usually say something like this, and then somebody gets really upset with me because they will say, well, I get 400 emails a day and I clear them all by 5 o'clock. I'm very productive. I'm going, liar, liar, pants on fire. For me, email is not real work. It moves information around and occasionally you get things done, but it's not real management work because I'm a bit old-fashioned that way. I want to talk to people virtually, in the office, walk the floor, really, and here's the key thing, throughout engagement and everything I've said to you today is connection. Know your people. And the best managers you'll see, you can look at engagement scores and performance scores and well-being scores, the best managers get that thing right. So how do we shift it? Well, we value the management role. We equip people to move. We hire people with management or people management nous or experience or capability or talent, right? And guys, we train the hell out of them. There is no shortcut to doing that. And it's a culture change. So it's a 3-year process. And now here's the kicker. If your leadership does not change with your management team, you're wasting your time. Okay, so when we work with Gallup and strengths, we always start with the CEO and work downwards, not managers upwards. That never works because it's too easy to boss managers around. Leaders have to create the space. And managers manage in the way that they are led. There's the key. So, Mafrit, no easy answers there, but I'm hoping to have given some clues around that.
And people, sorry, Yendor.
Go for it. No, go for it.
And people seem to agree. So
okay.
Yep.
All right. So you and Gallup and me on the same page. Elon, not so much. Okay. We'll take it from there. Okay. Anything else into the questions before I segue to Reba? Because I'm mindful we've got two power minutes left. I, of course, will be welcome to stay around for a couple more minutes, but I am mindful of time. Yeah.
Next up is Reba. And
no.
Yeah,
I think Mr. Felgate covered me well.
Yeah.
On his discussion, so I'm happy with his response.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just to give you a heads up, Mr. Felgate is my father, and every time you go, Mr. Felgate, I look over my shoulder. Yendor is fine, right?
Yendor. Okay, that's okay.
Fantastic. Okay, guys, we've got 1 more minute left. I'm really intrigued by any other questions. Again, if you want to hang around and ask those really personal questions over time, you're welcome to do that. Margriet, one last question in the chat before we close off. Yeah,
Yendor, I don't think there's any additional questions. I think the comment is just coming through that it takes time to shift management. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, and just keep training, keep reminding people.
Yeah. So to sum up, guys,
how often do you guys do these sessions?
Rebab, we do this about once a quarter, really. So look out, we'll do it on different topics as we roll out. It was just opportune because the new 2023 reports come out. The next one I'm hoping that we'll do in October will be coming out of the latest thinking from the recent Gallup Global Conference. And there's some really interesting leadership stuff there. So I'm probably leaning towards leadership. I'm not sure what Makrit's interested in, but we'll let you know around October.
I just wanted to thank my mentor who invited me for this. Nokwanda Madondo, who is on the call at the moment. I just want to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome,
for having to share this info with me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for being with us. Just to sum up then, guys, the world of work has shifted. It's moved from us being in charge to the will of the employee. The engagement data is unequivocal. The quiet quitting is a problem. In sub-Saharan Africa, it is an incredibly big problem for us, but it's low-hanging fruit. And when I say by low-hanging fruit, it's a little bit about shifting what we measure in the engagement space, the importance of well-being. And if we combine that and we equip our managers to have those great conversations, move from boss to coach, we're going to get an upside. Having said all that, managers can't do it by themselves. They need an enabling environment. Your leaders matter. So leadership alignment is so important. Guys, thank you very much for being online with us. We really appreciate it. We love the questions. We know that there's some incredible practitioners that are on these calls, and we, if we've sparked some interest or been a bit of a catalyst, job done. If we've answered some questions and so on. Now, we are around for a couple more questions if you want. If you want us to do this presentation with your organization, or you have any questions in the space, guys, you're very welcome to connect with myself. Again, the easy stuff for me, the hard stuff for Makrit, and then life is good.